Hello viewers, welcome back to the channel. You can see today I'm at my desk. It's a bit miserable outside, so I thought we'd do a classroom session. Today I'm trying to explain to you what happens at a car auction. And I don't mean the bit that happens in front of the rostrum. Obviously, if you've watched the car auction videos on various channels, you'll kind of get that, and I know a lot of you enjoy watching those. And I don't mean about the bit behind the scenes, behind, like where they're moving all the cars around, because, well, that's a bit dull. I'm going to talk to you today about what actually happens on the rostrum and how the car auctioneers control the sale, but they're not the ones actually pulling the strings. We'll go into a little bit more detail about how that works. But Bob, just before I run the credits, question for you. I'm not going to answer the question because it's a bit of a chicken and egg one, and I want you to discuss it in the comments before. But if you were the owner of an auction company, what would you prefer? Would you prefer high quality vendors, or would you prefer a greater number of buyers? So if you're running the auction company, do you want more cars or do you want more buyers? Answers below. Welcome back. So today, yes, we're going to talk about car auctions and exactly how they work. Now, every car that's at an auction, and I'm talking about the likes of BCA, Mannheim, Aston Barclay, they're all there on behalf of a company. And that may be a leasing company, it may be a dealer group, it may be something like Motability, for example, and sometimes it's even manufacturers have sales, although they're closed off normally to the actual franchise dealers. So if you ever wonder what auction companies do on the days when they're not open, sometimes they are actually open, they're just not open to you, but they'll be open to a franchise dealer network where a manufacturer will put their own stock that's come back through whatever channels. It might be staff cars that they have or whatever, they'll go back through, and they're only available to purchase by the franchise dealer network. That's why you never see those cars, and why they've always got a fresh supply of VW, Audi, Mercedes, BMWs on their forecourt. That's where they come from. But anyway, with regards to the other lot stuff comes through, like I said, the dealer group stuff and the leasing company stuff that comes through, they are controlled by what they're called vendors. So these are people that are representing those companies at the auction to dispose of that stock. Now, at an auction, when you walk in, obviously you've got the rostrum, and there are a number of people that stood on the rostrum. So obviously you've got your auctioneer, and sometimes you have two, depending on the speed of the sale and the volume they have to get through. Then you'll have someone stood to one side in front of a PC. Now they're the guys that control the online bids against the bids that are coming through in the hall. So obviously if it's all online, you won't have one of those people because it's all controlled. But if you've got a physical auction or any sort of auction where there are bids accepted online and in the hall, you'll have one of these people there that will control which bids are accepted. So an auctioneer will always take bids from the hall before they'll take a bid from a bid online or a live bidder, if you like. Because there's always a lot of latency. I say a lot, technology's moved on quite a lot now, but there is always a fair amount of latency between when you press bid now and it flashed up in front of their screen. It's not like seconds, we're talking like, tenths of a second, but there is still a latency. But the auctioneers will always go with bids in the hall before they look up at the screen or wherever it may be in front of them and say, I'll take a bid from online. I don't know if you know, but auctioneers are only ever trained to look for two bidders. So if they've got two bidders in the hall, they will play each other off against them. No matter what you're trying to do online, pressing bid now, the bids will always go for the people in the hall. When one of them drops out, or they stand back, or they think about it and whatever, that point, that's when the auctioneer will look for another bidder in the hall and then look up at the screen to see if there's an online bid coming through. So if you ever get a chance, go to the auction, because you've got a much better chance of getting your bid accepted before an online bid. And also obviously you get to see the car, so great. Not great for BCA, but great for everywhere else. So yeah, that's how that works. Anyway, the rostrum has, as I say, the auctioneers, the person that controls the bid, and then you'll have a person in the middle sometimes with a laptop. Sometimes they're not there because it's done remotely, but these guys are the vendors, and these are the ones who are basically acting for the cars that are coming through the auction. and they're the ones that will control the pricing. It's not the auctioneers. Don't for one second think that the auctioneers control the pricing, because they don't. I'm a member of a number of different Facebook groups where new guys into the auctions and new guys into the business in general will try and bid on a car, and this is where the whole fire extinguisher thing comes in. They'll bid, say, I don't know, say the car's worth £6,000. They'll bid 4,500 quid, put their hand up, and then even though there might be nobody else in the hall, the auctioneer will bid against the fire extinguisher and say 46, and then the person that's being bid against sort of looks around going, well, who's that bid come from? And then absolutely goes into a massive rage that they didn't manage to buy the car for £4,500 and the auctioneers are scammers and blah, blah, blah. Look, the reality of it is the guy who's selling the car wants £6,000 for that car. Now, in an ideal world, the auctioneer would start the bidding at £6,000 and let you all bid. But the reality of it is, and you know, I'm no different. Everyone wants a bargain. Everyone wants to get a cheap car. So it's no point setting the car off at a reserve unless it's a low reserve, because, you know, you're just not going to get the bids for it. So the auctioneer will start the bidding off a lot lower. But their aim is to get through the auction as quickly as possible and to get to the buyer's reserve, sorry, not the buyer's reserve, the vendor's reserve as quick as they can. Because once it gets to that stage, they know they can sell the car. So the vendor will sit in the middle and they'll start the bidding off. Again, like I say, with a £6,000 car, they normally start it off about, I don't know, in that range, say £1,000 below, but they'll start it off at a level where they can get to the reserve if there's a certain amount of bidding. So maybe 4.5 was a bit over dramatic in the last case, but let's say for a £6,000 car, they start the bidding off at 5. And it will take a while for them to get there. Obviously, they'll say 5.5, 5, okay, 4.8, and they'll point at something that isn't actually there and start the bidding at 4.8, because that's the game. That's how it works. And then they'll try and get the bidding going, 4.9, 5, 5.1, 5.2, and then hopefully people will get involved in the bidding. But whether or not they're making those bids up, or they're taking them off fire extinguishers, or they're, you know, pointing to somebody at the back that doesn't actually exist, is irrelevant to you, the bidder, at the time. Because even if you bid 5,300 quid, for example, in that case, and there's nobody else bidding, you're not going to buy the car. So whether the auctioneer takes another bid from something at 54, don't think for 1 minute he's done you out of a deal, or, you know, you're being scammed, because that's not the case at all. You're never going to get the car for 53, even if you bid 53. You know, what would normally happen is it would go on a provisional at that stage. The vendor at the end of the sale will sit down, look at your bid and go, 53. Well, he's not in it for that because my reserve on it is 6. So no. If you're close to it, let's say you've bid 57, for example, the auctioneer is unlikely to then say 58 unless he's being told by the vendor on the rostrum, and there are various hand signals that you can't see when you're on the floor, and there's a reason why the rostrums are high. It's not just so the auctioneers can see exactly who's bidding, although obviously that does help, but there's also a number of signals that goes on behind the rostrum, that, you know, if you imagine the rostrum's up tall and then there's another ridge under there, you know, there's hand signals that go on under there that say to the auctioneer, try and get another bid. And that's where you need to get £6,000 for the car. So even if you bid 5,700 for it, and you as a vendor know that you don't want to sell the car for that, you'll try and get the auctioneer to keep going. It's not illegal. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, the auctioneers are acting on behalf of the vendor, and the vendor's saying, I want £6,000 for that car, no less. That's the idea of a reserve. So, you know, you might bid 57, but if they're not ever going to sell it to you for 57, it makes sense for the auctioneer to try and keep it going to get to £6,000. Now, the auctioneers are clever, and they know the game obviously a lot better than sometimes the vendors do. You know, the vendors know more than the likes of us ever will do, and I know this because I've been one and I know how it works. You have to understand, they see more cars than, you know, I think I worked out in the 10 years I was doing it, I must have sold, I think it was something like it was over £250 million worth of cars, approaching £500 million worth of cars, not million, billion, because those are the numbers you're dealing with on a scale. And I wasn't one of the busiest ones. There was guys there that were selling a lot more than me, like 200 cars at a sale, sometimes even more than that. So they've seen it all, they know it all. The only people that have seen it more than those guys are the auctioneers themselves, obviously, because that's their job. And most of the time, the vendors and the auctioneers have a really close working relationship and they know exactly how each other works, exactly what hand signals mean what. But I want you to understand that, you know, bidding off the fire extinguisher, stuff like that, is not against the law or illegal or scammy or anything like that. A car auction is not eBay. You know, you don't bid the highest bid and then, you know, you have to buy the car at whatever price you've bid. It doesn't work like that. When you're talking about the numbers that we're talking about in the thousands, obviously it can't work like that. When you're bidding on a car and that process is going on, so let's say you get to 57, and let's take that to the next stage. Someone bids 58, someone bids 59, someone bids 6,000. As soon as the auctioneer says on sale, that's when all the games stop. You've hit the reserve that the that the vendor actually wanted, so they've got the money they want for the car. Once you hear the words on sale, or you know, that's it, you know, on sale, I think that's the only sort of phrase they use these days. At that point, you're buying the car. If you bid on a car at that point, it's yours. I'm not saying beforehand it's not, because obviously, you know, the vendor at the time might say, yeah, it can go at 57. But once you hear the words on sale, that's it. That's when the game gets real. Before that, you know, you can bounce it off fire extinguishers or, you know, the toilet door, whatever it is that's in the auction hall. But yeah, once you hit on sale, that's when it's real. So that's how that bit works. There's nothing scammy about it. It's just how the auctioneers have to get through a sale. And as I said at the very start, if we were all genuine and all prepared to pay exactly what the vendor wants for the car, because when the vendors have the amount of stock they have to get through, and like I said, you have 200 cars to sell at a sale. If you don't sell those cars because you're being greedy and you want more money for the cars than they're technically worth, what will happen then next time is when he turns up back to that auction hall, either it might be later in the week, it might be the following week, if they haven't sold any of those cars the previous week, well, guess what, there's going to be 400 cars there the next week, because the chain keeps going. You know, the flow of cars will keep going. Just because you didn't sell any doesn't mean that the flow of cars stops. You know, the businesses you work for is still doing business. They're still finding these, whether they're part exchanges or lease returns, they're still coming back into the auction hall. So it's vital for the vendor to move as many cars as he or she physically can on the day of sale. And while they will try and get as much for those cars as possible, that's their job, and you know, in most cases that's what they're bonused on. Right, sorry about that. Yep, camera battery died, but it did allow me to partake in a fresh Ainsley Harriet. So cheers, Ainsley. Minestrone this time. Yummy. Right, leave that alone for now. Where were we? Vendors and their commissions. Yes, so most of those, I call them vendors, but actually representative of vendors, but they are just referred to as vendors at the auction. So they will be paid a commission, and normally what will happen is that on the sale of the car, and let's take that example of the 200 cars, they will have sold hopefully around 75%. That's probably where you are at the end of the sale. Somewhere between 65 and 75% is where you want to be as a vendor, and certainly no less than that. If it's less than that, it's a bad day. And then you'll have, I don't know, 10 or 15% provisional bids. So that's the guys that's bid 57 and then wants it for 6. Oh, sorry, he wants it for 57, you want 6, and that's where you have a negotiation in between there to see if you can come to an agreement. But a lot of that will depend on how the sale has actually gone. If you've sold, as a vendor, if you've sold 80% of your cars and you've sold them for, let's say, for argument's sake, 100% of cap clean, some vendors might want to shift that car for 5,700 quid because, you know, well, it is what it is and we've had a really good day, let's get another one gone. Some will be like, well, actually, I've hit 100% of cap today, which is a fantastic result. My bonus is going to look great. I've sold 80% of the cars. That can wait till next week, and we'll have another go next week. So a lot depends on the individual company that's selling the cars, the representative for that vendor. It's not always a done deal that you'll get a car depending on how the day, but most of the time, at the end of the sale, they'll look at their spreadsheet, see where they are, and I think in pretty much most cases, if they've had a really good day and there's any provisionals, you add another £100 to your provisional offer and you'll probably get the car if it's a reasonable bid. You know, vendors don't want to mess you around. I know sometimes there's a bit of, you know, a vendor might say, you know, you can have it for another £400 and then you'll go back with another 100 and they'll agree. You might think they're just trying to scam you out of £100. That's not the case at all. They do actually want another £400 to hit their reserve, but they know if they've got another £100 out of you, let's take that £5,700 car again. So let's say after the sale, the vendor comes back and says they want £6,000, or the auction comes back on behalf of the vendor and says they want £6,000, and you say I'll give you another 100. They go away and talk about it, come back and say, yeah, you've got the car for 58. That's not the vendor trying to scam you out of another £200 to get to £6,000. They generally want £6,000 for the car, but their thinking is, okay, well, I've got a bid of 58. I wanted 6. It's £200. Am I going to get that much for it next week? And if it's a grade 1, obviously if it's £6,000, it won't be a grade 1, but follow my logic here. If it's a grade 1 car and it's immaculate and it's fairly low mileage and it's a, you know, it's not a Kia Ceed Estate or something like that, it's actually a desirable car, there's a good chance that the vendor will turn around and say no, because they'll know that next week they will get a bid that will clear it. But if a vendor looks at a sale and it's been a really busy sale and they've had loads of bids and they've sold loads of cars, they obviously think, well, I used to think, well, it's not going to get any better than this next week. You know, we're not going to get even more bidders. We're not going to sell 95% of it straight off the bat. And the chances are, if you've had a really good sale, you know that's as good as it's going to get, and that's probably the best price you're going to get. You jog it on and you get rid of it for 50. You wanted 6, absolutely you wanted 6, because that would make your figures look like how it should do. But 58, okay, let's get that gone and we'll try and make £200 up on another car that's massively kitted with extras and might make more money. So anyway, that's how that works. Oh, nice bit of minestrone. So, as I said, that's that. But, and it's, in my mind, it's a fairly big but. Around, well, not around, it's been the case for 15 years now. When BCA bought We Buy Any Car, that became a bit more of an issue, because at that point, you've got BCA effectively selling their own cars. Now, they are separate companies. We Buy Any Car and BCA are separate companies under an umbrella. And they're managed as such. So, you know, where you think BCA might be running the value of, say, a We Buy Any Car price up, so they don't lose any money. Quite frankly, the auction side of BCA doesn't really care what We Buy Any Car are doing. They're two completely separate companies. But the We Buy Any Car business have got their own targets to hit. They've got their own margins to meet, and they've got their own sale price to hit. If somebody at a site has given too much money for a car, they want to try and get out of it for more money. So ideally, they'll hold out for as much as they can. They're not trying to scam you, the buyer. The actual scammer in all of this is the member of the general public who's taken their amazing, beautiful, wonderful car. They've made it, you know, they've turned all the lights off and everything like that, taken it to We Buy Any Car, pumped the tyres up to make sure that the flat doesn't show. The poor guy at We Buy, I say poor guy, you know, the individual at We Buy Any Car looks around the car, yeah, all seems good, no lights on, yeah, it's not, you know, it's all good and fine. They give you the money that the car's worth, and then of course 5, 10, and the people that have bought We Buy Any Car cars will know 10 miles down the road, it starts lighting up like a Christmas tree, knocking, banging, there's a chunk from here, there's a bang from there. You know, that's not the auction company, or indeed We Buy Any Car, that are trying to scam the buyers of those cars. That's Joe Public, being Joe Public. And that's part of the whole risk of We Buy Any Car. But We Buy Any Car, of course, have got to make up for the shortfalls where they've been scammed. So you know, they might try and run a car up, and that's using the same technique as I said before, but possibly with a little bit more gusto, because obviously I guess they all kind of have the BCA email address, so they all know the game. Again, it all boils down to, if you have a reserve for a car, the auctioneer will try and get to that reserve, and once they get to that reserve, then they'll sell the car, whether it's a We Buy Any Car vehicle, whether it's a Motability car, whether it's a Marshall's car, an Arnold Clark car, a insert dealer group name here. Any one of those, it's the process is the same no matter what. But going back to We Buy Any Car and where it gets a bit dodgy, again, a few years back, and we're talking, I don't know, probably, time flies now, it's probably 8 years ago, some of the leasing companies entered into agreements with some of the big auction companies, and I don't think it's a secret that BCA struck a deal with Lex, where BCA give Lex, I think it's, I don't know the deal. If you do a Google on it, you'll find the original article about it. But they gave them a percentage of cap clean for all their cars. So as soon as they came off from Lex, BCA pays them the price, or they get the value for the price, and the transaction goes through whenever. But Lex know exactly where they stand. Let's say they sell the car for, I don't know, 97% of cap clean. You know, they'll put that against their written down value figure, or their residual value figure, and I'll do another video on that part of it. That's really interesting. They've got that price, and then it's up to BCA then to get 97% of cap for that car they've just bought off Lex. Now, some of the lease cars are lovely because, again, I'll save this for another video. Watch my next video about valuations on cars and how it all works, because that's really interesting, and that will give you an idea of how the whole purchase of lease cars works. But again, for me, that's a little bit uncomfortable, because then, whereas We Buy Any Car are a separate company from BCA, when the leasing companies are selling their cars directly to BCA, then that gets a little bit, I'm not saying the market is manipulated by them, because they have a price they need to get to, and they'll try and get to it like any other vendor would. But when the vendor is the auction company, and it's not just BCA. I think it was Ogilvy were in a deal with Kazoo, where Kazoo bought all their cars because, the demand, especially after COVID, the demand was everyone wanted a really reliable source of used cars, and what better than a leasing company? So the auction companies that had set up deals with them, the leasing companies that had set up deal with people that wanted these used cars, they were in clover. It was absolutely brilliant. It worked for everybody, including the buyers that wanted the cars as well. So, there's method to the madness, and what I'm trying to say is it's not all a scam, although I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the auction companies getting their own cars to sell. But please don't think that everyone's out to get you. Then, as a trader, they're not. It is all part of a game, we're all part of it, and we're all, we know, but there's nothing illegal or scammy about it. It is just what it is, unfortunately. And I hope that sheds some light on exactly what goes on from an auction point of view, and how it all works. If you want to know any more, drop comments below, and I'll try and answer them as and when I can. There's probably a few friendships lost today, but you know what they say, if somebody hasn't spoken to you in a year, they're probably not a friend. So, I'm working here, no one speaks to me, so I haven't got any friends. But anyway, watch my next video, because that will be, hopefully a really interesting watch for you, about how motor manufacturers and everybody all try to make their cars as attractive as possible to get the best possible price. I can't explain it now, it's either I just talk about it. So yeah, if you've enjoyed that, the Geel, Jesus Christ, need some more soup, hang on. Yeah, you know the deal, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. I'm trying to get to 1,000, that helps me get me monetized, and then I can actually afford, all this camera equipment and microphone stuff that I've been buying to make this channel. So please subscribe, it would really help. And hit the notification bell, so when that valuation video goes up, which I'm going to try and get done after this one while it's still a bit miserable outside, you'll be able to watch that one as well. So yeah, thanks very much, and see you in the next one. Cheers for watching.